Hey everybody, what's up? Hope you guys are doing good today. Out on the lake today here at Grand Lake, and got the boys with me here a little bit. Say hi. What you doing? Say hi. And what we're gonna do today is I'm gonna sort of take you guys around and show you the type of stuff, the type of banks and structure that I like to look for in the springtime of the year. You know, that March through May time frame. Sort of give you an idea of what I look for. You know, how I approach the water, and just sort of show you what looks good to me. So here we go. Okay guys, here's one of my favorite early spring areas. I'm talking about when the water temperatures are below 50 degrees. It's these main river, main lake channel banks like this, short bluffs, areas like this where the water drops from, 5 to 20 feet deep fairly quick. And these fish will stage on these type of banks right here, all through the spring really, and they get back on it even after they go spawning in the coves. They'll come back in here in May on these channel type banks and set up. And the key areas you're going to look for here, as you can see, we're coming up here on the little rock transition area. It's a pretty subtle transition. You got some big chunk rocks gradually mixing in more with sort of like the grapefruit size. As you can see up in front of me, the bank starts to flatten out a little bit. Now this transition area, all the way back behind me that we just saw, where there was a short bluff, and as you can see here, it starts to flatten out. There's some docks. These are key type areas because these bass will use not only the steeper type stuff, but they'll use these flatter banks and any shallow cover that you may have out in front of it. Some of this stuff, as the bank flattens out, you'll have some shallow laydowns, shallow wood, that type of stuff. And I think there's some up in front of us here. But what happens, you'll notice that the bass will be on the steeper type stuff when that water temperature is in like the low 50s, and once it starts to get up into the more in the upper 50s, and then again in May after the spawn, they start moving on these flatter banks, and they'll get around any of this type of isolated wood on the bank here. This is really good, and I'll get up here and I'll show you this one here. And another big key here is, like, you can see some of the subtle stuff on the bank there, just a little bitty, small stick sticking out of the water, just a little bitty log sticking out of the water. I mean, anything like that can hold fish. Don't ever overlook that. They can be really good for spinner baits, square bill crankbait, that type of stuff. And then obviously, even in these river sections on any flat banks in April, when those fish are starting to spawn, these fish like to get around they like to get around any type of shallow wood right up against the bank. Some of this stuff's going to be deeper than others, just depending on the bank angle. But this type of stuff right here is going to be good in the pre-spawn, spawn, and the post-spawn as well. But really a key looking area here. Okay, the next favorite cover that I have during the springtime of the year, and again, this is in all three phases of the spring, pre-spawn, spawn, and during post-spawn, is any type of flooded cover on the flatter banks. Now, a lot of times, in the springtime of the year, you have higher water levels, and it floods a lot of cover depending upon the lake you're on. It could be just trees like we have here. It could be flooded bushes. It could be willow trees. There's just a lot of different type of bushes, but these flooded bushes are among my favorite things to flip in the springtime. I generally like to fish this type of stuff when that water temperature is in the mid 50s up until 70 degrees. The bass will use this type of cover all throughout the spring. They'll spawn on the shallow parts of it. They'll use it in the pre-spawn, they use it in the post-spawn. It just depends on the angle of the bank and the bottom composition. One of the things you want to look for in the springtime of the year when you're fishing flooded stuff is try to look for the harder bottoms, like the gravel, rock type bottoms. The bass tend to gravitate more towards that in the springtime of the year. And just look for any irregularities in the bushes. I mean, even though like here you got a row of bushes that look the same, pay close attention to like where the dark places are, little points in the bushes, things that stick out a little bit further, any matted type, sawdust or anything like that. Works really good. But the flooded vegetation or the flooded bushes like this are amongst my favorite cover to fish in the springtime. Here's another type of bank I really like in the springtime of the year, is these flat gravel banks like this. These are really good in the pre-spawn when that water temperature is in the low to mid 50s, especially if you have a lake that is low, it's a couple feet below normal. Those good fish will get on these bare gravel banks like this with these just gradual sloping banks. and they'll set anywhere between 3 to 6 foot deep. And I like to take a lipless crankbait or square bill and just sort of cover water parallel to the bank anytime I find these gravel banks, particularly in late March. Here's another one of my top springtime structures. Is anytime you have a root wad like this on a large tree, this is an excellent area in the springtime of the year, because a lot of times these root wads, you know, they have areas that are washed out underneath them. Not only there are a ton of cover, but those areas that are washed out underneath them, a lot of times it's gravel, and they make for good spawning areas if they're in shallow enough water. And also after the spawn and the post spawn, this is some of the best type of cover that you can have for flipping and shallow cranking. So this is a top springtime cover for sure. Okay, and finally, here's one of my other favorite top springtime areas, an undercut bank. Anytime you have an undercut bank, I don't care if it's in a creek, river arm, main lake, whatever, this is a key area a lot of times for particularly pre and post spawn bass. I mean, a lot of times, you know, you got erosion underneath of this, and you've got some depressions. There's usually a fairly sharp drop, and these bass like to get right up against those banks in early spring. It's just one of the best areas where you can flip a jig or creature bait, something like that. Sometimes I'll get against it in parallel, you know, with a crankbait or something like that. But man, anytime you guys find undercut banks, definitely don't pass them by. Okay, there it is, guys. It's you know, a lot of the stuff I look for during the springtime of the year. Obviously, a lot of it depends on the type of lake that you're fishing, but normally about every lake that you're out there, if you've got a highland or lowland man-made impoundment, you've got some cover similar to this. A lot of the places I showed you guys today have a lot to do with the mid to late pre-spawn and the post-spawn. Obviously, during the spawn time of the year, a lot of those fish are going to use the shallower, flatter back ends of the bays and coves, that type of stuff. But depending upon what's available on the lake, sometimes they spawn on some of the stuff that I told you about. I mean, bass are very adaptable. They'll spawn on a lot of different stuff. I've seen bass spawning on tree limbs in over 30 foot of water, you know, that are just under the surface. You know, I've seen them spawning on tires everywhere. So they're pretty adaptable with that. But anyway, just a few tips. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys catch a few more fish this spring. See you later.